Hello everybody, my name is Jim Lanza. I'm the owner of Razor Baits out of Orlando, Florida. Been in business since 2012, but under Razor Baits since May of 2014. Right now I'm in the process of doing a order for Senko baits, which I call dipsticks. I'm working on a 5¼ inch. I've got a 400 bag order that I've got to do. That's 400 10-count bags, and I'm in the process of doing those. Majority of the baits are going to be black blue glitter with a blue tail. What I'm going to do is use my Ultra Molds Shooting Star, the full-size one of the original ones that were made back when Dave Mack first got his. Dave helped me out a lot with the setting up my machine. I've got a bad shoulder and I don't have the ability to pull or push real hard with it, and he made me aware that the Shooting Star required that. So I contacted Rupert over at Ultra Molds, and they came up with a design for a bracket that would hold the injector in the port, so I could pull it with one hand and fill the injector. But it's worked out real good. I've had the machine now for more than 2 years, 3 years, something like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and shoot some more of these baits. I've got about 1.5 gallons mixed up. I'm going to be putting another ½ gallon in the microwaves, heated up in the microwaves. I do it in cycles. I do like 11 minutes first cycle. The second cycle is about 4.5 minutes, and the third cycle is based on the position of the plastic, whether it's close enough in temperature or not. But I usually nuke it for like another 3.5 minutes. But I'll show you a little bit about my shop, and then we'll go from there. This is going to be a recorded video, as I tried to do a live video last night, and as I was setting up, I ran into big problems with the Shooting Star. The PIDs malfunctioned, and they froze at 264, which in past history I've had that, and it doesn't allow you to control the temperature. So what will happen is if you try to operate the machine with the PIDs frozen, she'll run the temperature all the way up to God knows where. I've scorched some plastic doing that in the past, and I mean, I've cooked it big time. So if you got a Shooting Star and you have problems with it heating up and the PIDs freeze, just turn the power off, actually turn the heat off, just leave the power on, and eventually the PIDs will reset themselves. Usually takes anywhere up to ½ an hour. But I'm going to take the selfie stick down and just point you around the inside of my shop. Hope I don't bore you too much. And then we'll get into shooting. Okay, this is pretty much a view of my shop. There's my shooting area, and over on the side over there is where I store all my completed baits. And then here's my mold rack. I've got about 120 molds in there, and I got miscellaneous 20 other molds. But I try to buy my molds for each bait that I make in groups of 6, and they're multi-cavity molds. Like I've just bought, just ordered in some more molds from Baitjunky. They're 10¼ inch stick bait. I ordered 5 more, so I'll have 6 of those. They're 4 cavities each, and I bagged 4 of those 10¼ inch stick baits in a bag that retails for $5.49. And each mold represents 1 bag of baits. So when I go to shoot them, I'll get 6 bags every time I shoot a series of molds, of those molds. Same thing with my other baits. You know, I've got what's called I call the Fat Boy, which is the 6-inch big stick that Baitjunky has. And I've got 6 of those molds and 6 cavities each. Originally was going to put 6 in a bag, but I cut it back down to 5. And it turns out that I got basically 7 bags of baits every time I shoot the 6 molds. And again, it works out fine for me. But I try to do everything in multiples of 6 or 12s. I do have a couple of, I have my swim baits, and I've got 12 2-cavity molds, and I put 5 of those swim baits in a bag. So I get 24 in a shot. So I'll get 4 bags, and then, you know, just short of a 5th bag by 1 bait. But what I'm going to do now is, well, I'm going to show you a little bit more about the shop. You know, there's my shooting star, and you can see the holders, the brackets for the for the injector. Sorry, I'm stuttering here. But that was designed by Rupert and them over there at Ultramolds for me because of my shoulder. I'll show you and demonstrate shooting in a few minutes, where I'll actually do a side view where you can see how I actually do it. You won't be looking at my back. But to carry on a little bit more here, there's my inventory section. I make 17 different baits, and I have 22 different colors, and I basically have everything there based on color. And here's some more of the boxes for inventory. And then down here I've got some stuff where it's waste, more or less, from shooting different baits, and being that they're single colors for the most part, I keep them on hand and I'll regrind them and I'll add them to new baits with some fresh, clear, raw plastic when I cook them up. But I don't like to throw that stuff away. It's hard to make money when you're throwing you know, a quarter of your product away because it's supposedly waste. But get back over here to the shooting area, and you see the vice pipe clamps on the wall. I use those to clamp my molds. And I also use screw extenders that I made. I have a video over on YouTube where it shows how I made these screw extenders. But what this one is here, this is a 3-inch screw extender, and it's got the little 1/4-inch base here that will go into the mold to hold it in place. And what I do is because I'm shooting usually 2, 3, 4, 6 packs at one time, I don't have time to sit there and go back and top off every bait. And if you don't top off, for the most part, I run into air bubbles in the top couple of baits. I'll still get air bubbles in the runners and the extensions, you know, the screw extenders, but it doesn't, for the most part, affect the baits whatsoever. And then because of the top of the screw extenders are kind of sharp here, the tip of the Ultramolds injector has an O-ring, and if you put the O-ring down on top of the screw extender, it'll cut the O-ring, destroy it, and you'll go through a whole bunch of O-rings. So many years ago, or a couple of years ago, I bought these screw extenders from Bears, which I know is no longer in business, but this was 1 inch. It was three for $15 or something like that, and I ended up buying 6, and I lost 4 of them, so I'm down to 2. But what I do is I use these as a topper for my screw extenders. That way, when I put the Ultramolds injector on top, the O-ring's not affected. It sits on this flat surface and it cushions it so it doesn't damage the O-ring. I do go through quite a few O-rings over a period of time, but for the most part I won't cut them on the screw extenders. I think I said it, but I have a YouTube page called Razor Baits, and it shows on there how I make the screw extenders, and they're nothing more than 1/2-inch couplers, copper couplers, and 1/2-inch copper pipe, and cut, measured, and hammered together, and you make screw extenders. I've got them anywhere from 1 inch all the way up to 3-inch with a deep throat. Well, that one don't have the deep throat, but this one's got the deep throat. Because I have a couple of molds that the first cavity is down about 1.5 inches. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't have backflow or any kind of problems. Okay, I'm getting ready to put another 64 ounces in the microwave to heat up more plastic. I want to put over about 2.5 gallons in the shooting star. But right now, what I normally do is I put the plastic in, I heat it up, then I add the color, and after it gets the temperature, I put color in it, then I put my glitter and my salt. When I have a solid color where I'm only using a colorant and I'm not putting any glitter or any salt in it, I'll put the color in it before I heat it up in the microwave. But if I got salt and glitter going in it, sometimes I'll put the colorant in, and then after it gets the temperature, I add the glitter and the salt. You can do it either way. I find no real problems with it. I just don't like adding a glitter to it and then putting it through the heat process, because when it's sitting in there for 15, 16 minutes cooking, it causes that glitter to warp, bend, become, you know, funny shaped. It'll still do that when you got it in the shooting star, because the temperature in there, if you're shooting 360, 350 degrees, it'll warp the glitter. But right now what I'm going to do is, Dave Mack taught me how to use the plastic instead of counting drops out. When you're doing large quantities like 64 ounces here, it calls for, in my situation, it calls for 2 milliliters of colorant. And to sit there and count out 2 milliliters of colorant in drops would take forever. So it basically, I take a plastic syringe. He showed me a new way of doing it, but the tips I have on my colorant bottles don't allow me to do the way that he said do it. So what I do is I just basically take my colorant, put it into the syringe through the top, and then fill it to whatever 2 milliliters, and then I inject it into the plastic. I'm going to demonstrate that now, but I'm going to turn it. Okay, now we're going to measure out to add colorant to our plastic. Most of my formulas call for 2 milliliters of colorant for 64 ounces of plastic. The way that Dave Mack taught me was to use a hypodermic syringe instead of doing drops. If you do 2 milliliters of drops, I have no idea how many drops that is, but that's a lot of drops. So what you do is you put the 2 milliliters in there, and then you add it to your plastic, and the syringe helps you out. Well, over a period of time, you lose the numbers on the syringe because the chemicals of the colorant, when it gets on the barrel of the syringe, wipes off the numbers. This is what a brand new syringe looks like, and you can see the numbers on there. Now, over a period of time, like I said, the numbers wear off because of the colorant. When you go to put the colorant into the syringe, you got to make sure that the bottom is sealed. So you have the plunger pulled out, and I buy these little hypodermic syringe caps off the internet, and they're designed to fit right on the tip of the syringe. And now what you got is you got it sealed. So what you do is you go and you add your colorant to your syringe, and what I have is this hole's drilled for 2 milliliters. So when the plastic comes up to wood level height, that's 2 milliliters. Now all I have to do is take this over to the plastic, pull the bottom off while I'm holding the syringe over the top of the plastic, put the plunger in, and then squirt it right into the plastic. I put the colorant in the plastic, and what I'll do is I come over and I'll pull the cap off the bottom, and now that it's exposed, it's open, it'll allow me to squirt the colorant into the raw plastic. And then what I do is I pull the plunger back out, and I put the cap back on, and then I just put it to the side. And then from there, like this situation, 64 ounces, it's real easy to mix with a knife. But what I do is I've got a cordless drill with a plastic tip paint mixer on it, and I'll just go ahead and I'll mix in the black, run it on medium or slow for a couple minutes just to make sure all the colorant gets mixed in, and then come out and I use a smaller Pyrex to get all the drippings off by just putting it down in there and hitting it real fast. Now I take my plastic and I'll put it in my microwave. And I'll set my microwave to cook for 11 minutes and 11 seconds. And that'll be the first warming. I've got another one in there that's going, and it's at 2 minutes left on the, I think it's the second cycle. But we'll get further along with that in a couple. Okay, I'm going to get my glitter set up. I've got blue glitter, and my recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of 015, 2 teaspoons of 035, and then 1 teaspoon of 062. And they're not accurate measurements, but it's a little bit more precise than just using dips and whatever the other measurements are. That way I can do this consistently for coloration. Okay, I've got 64 ounces of heated plastic. The colorant's already in it. I'm going to put the glitter in. And what I'll do is I'll dump it in, and just to get it started, I'll stir it with a knife, a butter knife, just to get it moving around in there, because if I use the cordless drill, what'll end up happening is it'll end up getting all bound up in the on the stirrer itself, and it's hard to get it off, and you go through a pain in the butt trying to get it mixed in adequately. So what I'll do now is I got it pretty much in there. I'll go ahead and stir it up. Okay, I just poured my salt into my 64 ounces of plastic, and I'm going to mix the salt up. I'm not going to basically tell everybody how much salt I use, because it's to each their own. Same thing with the colorant, and same thing with the glitter, it's to each their own. But I use salt based on my past experience and how I like to fish the baits and how they feel. And in the 5 years that I've been doing this with the stick bait, I've had tons of compliments and never have received a negativity about the way my baits fall, the rate of fall, or how durable they are. So I just stay with what I feel is comfortable for me, and you can do the same thing yourself. Okay, I'm going to put the plastic into the Presto pot. I'm only using one Presto pot. I'm going to use about 2.5 gallons of plastic. But what I do is I've got my blades in there. I got double blades, upper and lowers. And what I try to do is I try to get my lower blade where it goes left to right. So when I pull it out, I can basically stand it up on the lip of the Presto pot, and I can hold it there because of the glitter rack. Then I take my plastic and I pour it into the pot. Oops, normally I don't make a mess like that. But I pour it into the pot, and I use a spatula to basically scoop out all I can from the Pyrex. And then what I do just before I close it back up and start stirring it up, I'll take my mixing device and I'll just run it in there so all my plastic is now currently the same temperature mixed in. You don't have hot or cold in different levels. And I just run it through there a couple of seconds. Again, I clean it off. And then one thing I also do, and I'll show you this up close, is, see if I can get to it without, there it is. I use candy thermometers, and I put them on the blade, the lower blade of my stirring system, and I keep the tip of the candy thermometer off the bottom of the pot. But this way I know exactly what my temperature is. The PIDs are totally inaccurate, so I don't rely on them. I try to keep an eye on that candy thermometer, and it will tell me exactly what the temperature is. And in this situation, I'm trying to run about 350, and because I've had it open, it's about 275. But it'll get back up to temperature pretty shortly, and I'll go from there. But I always use a candy thermometer. The PIDs are in no way, shape, or form accurate. And the only way to get accurate is by using a PID, which is called a fuzzy logic PID. And I thought about going to those, but they're right now a little bit expensive, and it's not something I feel is necessary as long as I got these cheap little $5 Walmart candy thermometers. But my other 64 ounces of plastic is beeping, so let me get it out and pour it into the pot, and then we'll get into shooting. Okay, I'm gonna set up and start shooting now. I'm gonna start shooting now, and I'm gonna show you how, because of my shoulder, how I do this one-handedly. I know some people are curious about, when you shoot laminates, how you identify which is the top and which is the bottom. And what I've done on my injector, I've actually engraved it top, and I did some scratching around on it, so I basically can see at any time what's top and what's bottom. And what I do is I put the injector into the port on the top, I rotate it, it locks itself in position, and then with my good shoulder, my good arm, I pull my plastic out. Now what I like to do is, the first time I fill my injector, I like to go back and purge it to make sure that it's hot enough and everything's going good. So, and what I do to purge is I push up against my hip, and I push it in, and it purges the injector. And then had no error. So now I pull it out, and I got it full, rotate it to turn off the valve, and now I come over and I'll shoot. And I can get 3 shots out of each injector full of plastic, but I like to do 2, that way I know I have no bubbles. Every now and then you'll get a bubble or so at the top, and I just don't want to take any chances of putting bubbles in anywhere in my baits. So I fill the injector, rotate it to lock it off. I'll show you the shooting into the mold in a second, but I just wanted to show the filling the injector and purging the injector based on the bracket with my bad shoulder. And I use one hand to do that. So again, here, purging the injector, use my hip, and to fill my injector, I use my left arm, my good arm, and I just basically pull straight out, and it fills the injector. Okay, I'm gonna shoot again from a different angle. You won't be able to see me filling the injector and purging the injector, but you'll be able to see me shooting the molds with the sprue extenders. Excuse me. Like I said earlier, I have this one sprue extender cap that I had bought from Bear while he was still in business, and I put it on top because if you look at the injector nozzle, it's hard to see because of all the crud on here, but there's an O-ring right there, and that O-ring will get damaged if you put it down on top of that copper, that thin copper edge. So I put the injector in the bracket into the orifice or the port. I pull my plastic. My injector is now filled with plastic. Rotate it to bring it out. Come over to my mold. I put the injector into the Bear sprue extender. I shoot, and then what I do is I pinch the sprue extender with my hand, and I'll push up on the Bear sprue extender so it comes up with the injector, and then I move to the next spot, put it right in the hole. Again, I shoot, and then I pull it out of the Bear injector, leave it in place, come over, purge my injector, come back, fill my injector, kind of put the framing of the injector against the sprue extender to pull the Bear sprue extender out, put the tip of the injector in there, inject, come over, pinch, push up, move the Bear's sprue extender to the next place, inject, separate, go back, purge, again using my hip. Okay, refill the injector. Come back over, apply a little pressure, pull the Bear's injector up, or the Bear's sprue extender up, inject, pinch, separate the sprue extenders, put the Bear's on top again, shoot, and separate, I got another mold here. That's the Baitjunky 10 1/4 inch mold. And being that I've only got one, I'm shooting it with no color tail, but I'm shooting it the solid black with blue glitter. So I can build an inventory of that until I get my 5 other molds from Leonard. Okay, put the Bear's sprue extender on top of my sprue extenders. Fill the mold, separate, purge the injector. Put it back in the hot plate. And then what I do is I've got a little sunbeam timer, and what I'll do is I'll push the button on it and I put it on top of the mold and I wait 2 minutes, and then I separate the baits or the molds and take the baits out of them. Now on this mold over here, it's been more than 2 minutes, so I know that they're solid enough that I could go ahead and take them out of the mold and put them in water, which I like to do for curing. And the sprue extender that I have on top of the baits, the molds, kind of act as a handle, helps you separate the molds. You push down, lift up, and the mold's open. What I normally do is I'll take my scissors and I'll cut where the sprue itself meets the top 2 cavities. Pull the scrap of the runner out. Then what I'll do is I'll take the scissors and I'll go right down the runner, and I'll split the sprue so that I have 5 baits on one side, 5 baits on the other side. And you can see black blue glitter with the blue tails. Put them in water, close up the mold, put it to the side. Do it again. One of the things you could always do is, I like to do that from time to time so that the plastic don't get stuck in the sprue extender. Separate, cut it, pull it apart, cut the runner, drop it in the water, close the mold. I'm going to put more blue tails in these molds, but I don't want to sit there and bore the hell out of you doing it. I'll do it with the camera off, and then bring it back up when I go to shoot. Got it there, just take it over to the water, cut it the rest of the way, drop it right in the water to cool. Now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll demold all these things, and when I get done demolding them, then I'll go ahead and I'll put the blue tails in them. And once I get done with the blue tails, I'll go ahead and I'll pull the baits that are already in the water out of the water and hang them. And I'll show you what I'm going to hang them on after I do this mold here. Okay, I've now got all 12 stick bait molds demolded. The contents of the molds cut in half, so I got 2 sets of 5 from each mold. And then what I'm going to do is they're sitting in water cooling, and now what I'm going to do is transfer them to my drying rack. Now these racks I picked up at IKEA. They were like $3 a piece, but it was a couple of years ago. I don't even know if they still make them. But what I do is I hang them on here, and then I transfer them to another spot on the other side of the shop where I let them hang for 3 to 5 days to cure. But what I do is I take them out of the water, and then I basically put them 3 in the middle and 2 on either side, and I put them on the rack. And putting them on the rack like this, I can get 15, well actually it'll be 15 bags for me, but I can get 30 of these halves, these 5 sections on each one of these runs. So I'll have 15 bags here because I have 10 in a bag. So I'll have 30 halves on here, and that'll be 15 bags here, 15 bags here, 15 bags here, and 15 bags here. So basically what I'll do is I'll end up having what is that, 15, 30, 45, 60, 60 bags on this, and that'd be 600 baits. So to go back and continue hanging them, just take them, put 3 in the middle, 1 on either side, slide it up tight, 3 in the middle, 1 on either side. Okay, back at it. There's all the molds, all 12 of them, with the tails all set up. Now all I do is close the molds up and then shoot them and be on my way again. If I wasn't shooting tails, what I would do is, instead of putting the sprue back on the rack, I'd go ahead and start putting the sprue extender right on top of the molds. That way I'm ready to clamp and shoot again. But the tails, you gotta open the molds back up in order to put the tails in before you can shoot, so there's no sense in putting the sprue extender back in it. What I am gonna do is I'm gonna show you the difference of shooting with the sprue extender and without the sprue extender, to show you what I get when I try to, what I call, mass produce, because I'm gonna be doing 6 molds at a time. And with the 6 molds at a time, you don't get enough time when you're doing a whole bunch of stuff. You don't get enough time to go back and top off the molds. So with the shrink down that you have, you end up getting a lot of air in the runner, and sometimes it goes into the head of the baits. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and clamp these molds here, and I'm going to shoot these 6. 3 with a sprue extender and 3 without a sprue extender. And I'll show you what I'm talking about as far as the air getting into the top of the baits. Hopefully I won't have any that I'll have problems with it. These will be just, you know, one color, won't have the blue tails. Now I'll be able to shoot the all 6 of them, and we'll be able to examine 3 with the sprue extender and 3 without a sprue extender, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. It doesn't happen all the time, but there's just too many times that it does happen. It makes it worth my while just to put the sprue extender on. Okay, here we go. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay. 3 with screw extenders, 3 without a screw extender, not topping them off. We give those a couple of minutes to cool. Now we'll come back here. We're going to start with the ones without the screws on them. Oops, not thinking. Okay, I'm going to cut these guys in half as far as the runner. And if you look, you see the void right there? That's from the sucking down of plastic. And this first bait, it's not really affected, if anything, right on the very tip. But, you know, I don't want to take the chance of having a bait get air in it while I'm trying to mass produce, per se. Again, this one here is shrunk down. You can see how it shrunk down into that first cavity, and it still feels good, but still it's too close for comfort as far as I'm concerned. And this one here feels like it's got air. With the glove, it's hard to really tell. But again, you can see that it's got a void in there. And I don't know how well you can see it, but you can see that there's a big void in there. And it basically goes right into the opening at the gate, right at the opening of the cavity. Now, that's 2 out of the 3. We won't open the third one. But now we'll go to the ones that I have the screw extender on. This time I'm going to pull the screw through the extender, and I'm going to actually cut it down a little bit so it's a little easier. And if you look right in there, you see a little hole. I don't know if you can really see it or not. You can see a little hole. But let me cut this open down the center, and we'll compare the runners to each other. Okay, the one over here, which is on my left, your right, if you look, you can see a little void in there. But if you look at the one on my right, which would be your left, you can see a big void. Now, the plastic was able to, or the bait was able to suck up the plastic without causing a problem. And I don't think there's any possibility really that you can get an air bubble in there. Now, let me cut this off and show you the difference. Okay, this is cut off at the top of the bait, the top cavity, right where the top cavity ends. That's cut off there. This is the one with the screw extender cut at the same exact spot. And if you look at it, there's no real air in there. And that's going to be most likely 99.9% of the time, you're going to have absolutely no air in the baits here. Where this one here, you may get air in the top bait. And I guess when you're shooting 10 cavities and you're shooting for fun, it really don't matter. But when I'm trying to produce, 400 bags of 10 count, 4,000 baits, I got to make sure I don't have air in them, and I can't sit there and keep going back and top it off. That's why I made the screw extenders. And it's pretty consistent with the screw extenders as far as the amount of air that is left in them after they're after you shoot them. See, there's a little itty bitty hole before I cut the screw extender, the screw runner open. But once I cut it open, there's still a lot of meat inside that you can see the little bit of an air vent here, but it's nowhere near the gate for the bait. So there's 99.9% of the time, I'm sure there's no air in that bait. Well, right now I'm pretty well going to shut this down. I hope you guys enjoyed what I did, and I hope you have an understanding of how I did it. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. I will be probably doing a live video in the future. I've got another system that Leonard from Baitjunkies and I designed. It's a Presto pot with Leonard's stirring motor and Leonard's super large injectors. And Leonard and I designed a 3-position PID system to run that thing. And it's got an old High Rock, who's no longer in business, but a High Rock double barrel rack system as the holder for the injectors. And what it does is it keeps the High Rock double barrel rack keeps the injectors hot because it's got a heat cartridge hooked up to it. And if you look over here, let me pull the camera with me. If you look over here, this is a Baitjunky single PID system. I've got this connected to the heating block. You know, right there is the 2 red sets of red wires coming out. That is the heating cartridges, and that holds the heating block there. And that's what heats everything up. And originally it was set up to the individual PIDs that ran the left pot or the right pot. And what I did is I separated it and I put it on here, and I got the temperature sensor going to here so I can tell what the temperature is. And I use that to control the temperature there, because like right now I got it set at 450 and it works its way up to 420, 430. Right now it's at just under 400. Well, that concludes my video of the Ultramold Shooting Star system. You can produce a lot of product with that system as long as you have the quantity of molds and you have a high mold cavity count. It is a good system. It does have its glitches and its problems, and for the most part you can work your way around it, but you can use it for production. You're not going to be equal to the big boys, but you can do a lot more than your average weekend manufacturer. If you got any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'll be more than happy to try to answer whatever I can, and I hope this video is very helpful to you. Thank you for your time.